will now be recorded.
Good evening. I'd like to open the Harwich Board of Selectmen's meeting for January 11, 2021. And I'll start asking for a roll call of the selectmen present. Ed?
Here.
Michael?
Here.
Steve?
Here.
And I'm an I. Don, are you caught up with us yet? If not, we have a quorum of 4, and as far as I understand, Don will catch up with us soon. We'll move next then, Joe, since you have the flag, to a pledge of allegiance. If you'll join me in the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That never comes out well on the go-to meeting, but there we go. Joel, let me pass the baton to you and Megan to bring us up to date on COVID.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members. Quite a bit to get into with COVID-19. As you know, from my message last week, we did hear from the state on Thursday that we are a community that has gone back into the red, if you will, as far as caseload goes. So, the cases are not abating in Harwich, and we're hitting some of the highest numbers that we've seen for the duration of this pandemic. With that, I'll turn it directly over to Megan Eldridge, our Public Health Director. Canned, rested, and ready after her vacation. So, Megan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Staycation. I got to reset. Got my mind reset after this staycation. Good evening. As Joe said, we are back in the red. We're considered a high-risk community once again. Our positivity rate has gone up over that threshold of 5%, and we are at 5.15% with 55 cases in a 2-week period, the 2 weeks prior to Saturday. At the moment, we have a total of 350 cases since the beginning of COVID-19 within the town of Harwich. And we're following the highest number of active cases we've had to date, which is 44. We have 44 active cases. That does not include the cases at Wingate. Wingate does have cases among staff as well as residents there. So the numbers that I'm reporting on are just for the town itself outside of the long-term care facility. It seems to be a lot of household spread still from the holidays. The Christmas break and the week between Christmas and New Year's, we saw some travel-related spread. We saw some gathering spread that included both the younger groups as well as the older. So we have quite a range in our cases. They range from 5 years old till into their 80s. So it's not just one specific group that we're focusing on. However, we are seeing many cases within one household. So it's not just one here and there. When it gets into a household, it typically runs through the entire household, unfortunately. I did update the board this afternoon with a COVID-19 written report. It wasn't able to get into the packet. Was not in the office last week to get it into the packet on Friday. So it will be on the website if it's not already. I have sent it to Jamie to get it up on the website so the public can see it. It doesn't have too many fancy graphs or anything. It just has the typical counts and rates from state show our positivity rate and that we're in the red. And it does have a chart from Barnstable County that shows where the exposure settings are, and it does clearly show that household spread is the biggest culprit for new cases. We are seeing some school-aged kids that are positive, and fortunately, we've been out of school during this time, so it hasn't been spread within the school setting. That is one reason why we had a delayed in-person start for the Monomoy Regional School System. We were pending quite a few cases over the break and didn't want to send kids back to school while we were still waiting quite a few results. Which the school nurses and the VNA have been working really well together to make sure we catch all the travelers or the family members who have positive that have other kids in the household that we've been waiting for test results on. Reopening plans. Governor Baker did announce that the temporary extension of order number 59 will continue for an additional 2 weeks. So this goes until noontime on Sunday, January 24th. It is the extension of the order that limits capacity inside most businesses to 25%. It's what we're operating under right now. We're still seeing very high transmission. So he has decided to extend this temporary order. It's important to note that this also includes restaurants. We didn't limit capacity in restaurants per se in phase 2 or 3 before. It was as long as you could maintain social distance, you could have as many people as you can fit. But now it is 25% of your indoor seating capacity. So hopefully businesses are adhering to this. We have a couple of complaints that require follow-ups, but so far it's been fairly quiet with complaints about restaurants and the 9:30 closure time as well. Vaccine update. This is probably the #1 question we're getting in the health department is, when can I get vaccinated? How will I get vaccinated? We are on track with the state's vaccine rollout plans. We're still in phase 1, and they are doing it in order of list that they have posted on their website, and I've posted it on our website as well. Everyone in phase 1 needs to be vaccinated in order of priority before we move to phase 2. So phase 1 started December, and we've done our COVID-facing care facilities. Those are the nurses and doctors and people working face-to-face with patients. And then we did our long-term care facilities, rest homes, and assisted living facilities. Those are pretty much done with their first round, their first dose. And this week we are working on our first responders. That's EMS, fire, police, and those private ambulance companies. They're all eligible under first responders. We are working with Barnstable County to roll out our vaccine distribution plan. We are working with the towns from Yarmouth East, and we are all working together to vaccinate all of our first responders at 3 different sites. And those first responders are aware of how to get in touch with the site to set up an appointment. And then once they're on this week and the beginning of next week, we can move into congregate care settings, shelters, correction facilities, and group homes. And then we'll do home-based healthcare workers and healthcare workers doing non-COVID facing care. So those are behavioral health specialists or administrative people that aren't in the forefront. Once phase 1 is through, which it is on track, we should be end of January, beginning of February. We'll move into phase 2, which is much broader categories. We have individuals with 2 or more comorbidities, which are health conditions that make you more susceptible to complications of COVID-19, and or people that are 75 years or older. That's the first group. And then we have the second group, which is early education and K through 12 workers, transit workers, grocery store, utility, food and agriculture workers, sanitation, public works, and finally public health. We get in there in phase 2. And then once those 2 groups are done, then we can start vaccinating general 65 and older population, and then individuals that are younger than 65 that just have 1 comorbidity. That phase 2 is between February and April. And again, we are working with Barnstable County to help us do our clinics. We're working with all of the towns on the Cape to figure out the best way to disseminate the vaccine. We may end up doing our own Harwich clinic, or we may end up doing a regional clinic with 1 or more other towns. It's an issue of resources, who we can get to do vaccinations and man the drive-through clinics. We, right now, will go through the same process as we have done for flu clinics, where there will be a registration process. So at the moment, we are not taking a waiting list name. We're not taking registration or appointments at this time, mostly because the plans aren't set in stone, and we'll most likely be using an online registration type of platform that the county has put in place to help with vaccine distribution and accountability. Also, CVS, Walgreens, and the other one that we have, it's not Rite Aid, Osco, those 3 pharmacies are also going to receive vaccine when it's able to be distributed to the public. Local public health departments will not be your sole source of vaccine. And we are waiting every week for new information from the Department of Public Health, who gives it to us as they get it. So when we get information on something new or something to update, we will alert the public through a reverse 911 call, through the newspaper, through the website, through public meetings such as this. It is kind of a wait and see game at the moment as far as when we're going to be moving into phase 2, but so far so good with the state's rollout plans staying on track.
Thank you, Megan. Any questions, comments for Megan? Thanks again. Happy, hope you had a good vacation. Well, welcome back.
Thank you. And just one last thing, Outer Cape Health Services has announced that they're extending their free testing options. It's a rapid test. It's a nasal swab, but the results are ready within an hour. You can contact Outer Cape Health at 508-905-2888 to set up an appointment, and it's for symptomatic or asymptomatic people, and it is free, and it's going to be free through the month of February. That is incredible news, and I hope that spreads far and wide.
Megan, do you know, are they using all 3 locations, or is there all 3 locations?
All 3 locations.
Thank you, that is good. Ed?
Yes, Megan, listening to the news, there appears there will be a change in the federal government's plan on rolling out the vaccinations in the near future, which will probably percolate down through the state to us. It looks like the change may be dovetailed in I'm not sure if it's a better way or a way with how we did our flu vaccines in the past, flu clinics in the past. Have we pulled out the the protocols that we had set up for those flu clinics at the community center to review them?
Yeah, we ran 2 flu clinics this year through the community center. We adapted our plan to do it outdoors through a drive-through setting. Our community center is our emergency dispensing site, and it's registered with the Emergency Operations Center through the state. If and when we ever need to receive supplies through the state, they would be delivered there. So that plan gets dusted off every year, and we go through either a real clinic or a drill type clinic.
Okay, and I guess the second question, not necessarily for you, but I know in setting up and planning for those past clinics, the Assistant Director of Emergency Management was heavily involved at the time, that person having been, oh shoot, the name is escaping me now, Lee Culver.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, Larry, have we appointed a new assistant director? Because technically you're the director.
As far as I know, no.
Okay, we need to take that up. Don?
Yes.
So, Larry, if I may,
Joe?
the retired Chief Norm Clark is filling the role that Lee Culver had taken until the matter comes before the board fully. Retired Deputy Chief Tom Gagnon, who we all consider to be the assistant director, is still on board and is still working with staff at different times and still working on grants. So we do have staff in place, but we can expedite that that overall process if that's what the board wants to do.
Okay.
But we do have people in place presently.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Before we move on, welcome, Don. We have a full meeting, so I assume you would catch up with us as soon as we started. Joe, going back to you then.
Nothing further on COVID. I'd turn it over to the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce, and hopefully she has some cheery news. Not to put any pressure on you, Cindy.
Thank you. I always try to bring some lightheartedness to the meeting. Good evening, everyone. As we're looking forward to when our restaurants get to open for the season, myself and the president of the chamber met with Joe and Danielle last week to start that process of outdoor dining, what the procedure will be, like we did this back in the spring. So we're coming up with the plan, which will include our March all license meeting that we do with the license holders, the liquor stores and restaurants, formulating all of that. And the seasonal renewals come out in February, March. So we're putting together some ideas of how to formulate that. And then we'll be back in front of you to just unveil that process probably in the next 2 weeks, I would think. Other than that, the deadline for the sector-specific grant through Mass Growth Capital is on January 15th. If any business or anyone out there needs help or has questions, please reach out. This is a grant, so not that it's free money, but it's not a loan that you have to pay back. So there is a process. It does take some time, but it is something that is available to the small businesses. Other than that, it's not snowing. How's that? There's my bright news for the day. Other than that, everyone's still plugging along, moving forward. And again, if anyone needs anything, I am in the office, locked in tight by myself, but I am there if anyone needs anything.
Thank you, Cindy.
Larry?
Yes, who's
Ed?
Ed?
Yeah, just a note for in our business community, I received a copy of the January issue of the Massachusetts Restaurant Association newsletter, and the highlight restaurant in it this month was Harwich Restaurant, and it's the reason I think they were picked is that it was a restaurant that went under new management a month before the pandemic started, and they seem to have been able to pivot and stay alive, and in some ways flourish during the process. And that's the Seal Cafe and Pub. And it was quite nice to see one of our own restaurants highlighted in that way. And it was a number of the comments they made in the article about how the town responded were quite appreciated.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Cindy. Joe, is there more from the town perspective on? I assume we're operating in the same formats we have, just extended for a couple more weeks, as Megan's suggested.
That's correct. We're waiting to hear when the governor meets again and when he updates again. Where he's extended for 2 weeks, we can probably expect to hear something on that, probably the latter half of next week. I would imagine Wednesday, only because the governor is tied into the Mass Municipal Association's annual meeting next week, as are we. So I'm sure he would like to dispatch that before he descends upon hundreds of local officials. So if anything changes, we'll keep you posted.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. And thanks again, Cindy. We'll move next
You're
to,
welcome.
is there anyone here for public comment or announcement?
But Larry, we did receive word that there's a few folks that are going to be looking to talk about specific agenda items.
Okay.
Not aware that anyone has asked to be recognized under public comments.
All right. And Joe, you have that list so you can bring them in play when that comes
Yes.
up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving next into our annual committee presentations. We'll start first with Community Preservation. Hello, David Nixon.
Mr. Chairman, hello, everybody online. I'm gonna abbreviate some of this report. You have it. And anybody who wants to read the report in its entirety can find it on the CPA website. Harwich adopted the Community Preservation Act, CPA, modified to accommodate and replace the so-called land bank, effective beginning July 1st, 2005. The primary source of the revenue for the CPA is the property tax surcharge of 3%. That's assessed to every one of the taxable properties within the community. The other major sources of revenue are the Massachusetts Community Preservation Trust Fund and interest revenue. The committee is composed of 9 members. We have 8 members as it stands. We need 1 more member, and that would be the selectman's second appointee. Last year's rounds of Community Preservation Act funding, we received 15 applications totaling $3,691,593 for review and deliberation. There was approximately $3,551,451 in total available for distribution. A few of the projects were withdrawn. The 26th of the September 26, 2020 town meeting, all CPA articles were passed. And the town voted to approve approximately $1,921,767, of which $341,750 went to the land bank service. In 2020, the committee has successfully rescinded approximately $136,779.76. And I will do my usual due diligence and have a discussion with the finance director and with DOR to see if we can use that money this year. I haven't been successful as of yet. On October 31st, 2020, the committee received 16 applications with requests totaling $2,772,041 for review and deliberation for a funding approval for the 2021 town meeting. There is approximately $2,790,500 available for distribution. In January 2021, the committee has begun the discussion of the submitted applications. And as far as the questions for the board, the members' attendance has been excellent. All the members are sworn in. They've done their ethics exams, and all the agendas and minutes have been posted. Thank you, John Ketchum. Any questions from the board?
Questions for David? David, excuse me, Don, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not so much of a question, it's an observation. I'm the liaison to the Community Preservation Committee, and I have to say, it's not a left-handed compliment. I really mean it as a vote of confidence. I was a frequent flyer at their meetings in the early part of 7 years ago, 6 years ago. David has done an extraordinarily good job. I'm a big process guy, and I don't like getting involved, particularly. Hold on, baby Ben is ringing here. I hope my time's not up. But the process was rather opaque, to be polite about it, a number of years ago. He's done a lot of due diligence with that. They operate off of a plan. He's transparent about what kind of money is available in each of the buckets. And not being one to second guess people's opinions, I'm not really needed to be there because they're deliberating in the way that they're supposed to deliberate. But I give a lot of praise to the way it's operating right now.
Thank you, Don. David, do you recall when the land bank is paid off?
I believe it's 2024, but you'd have to check with the finance director with that.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? If not, keep up the good work, as Don says, and we'll be in touch.
Again, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Conservation Commission.
Mr. Chairman, we were notified that Brad Chase was going to be on the call, as well as Amy Usowski.
Yeah, there was a little confusion because their written material didn't get in the packet, and so I asked that they go ahead and make the presentation if they could, and we'll add the written material next week, so we would keep on schedule. But I don't.
Larry, this is Amy Usowski.
Hi.
Brad. Hi, Larry. Brad had told me that he would be present. Brad, that's *6 if you're listening. And
hi,
you're
Amy.
one of the callers. Hi, Brad.
How are you?
Brad.
Hey, Larry, how you doing?
Good.
Want to go ahead with the presentation, Larry?
Pardon?
Want to go ahead with the presentation?
I do. Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Well, briefly, here's our 2020 report. The charge of the Harwich Conservation Commission is to uphold the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and Harwich Wetlands Protection Bylaws and Regulations. The Commission is also charged with managing all town lands that have been put into the care and custody of the Conservation Commission. So presently we have a full membership with 7 full-time members and 2 alternatives. and all members are up to date with their ethics training. We also are very fortunate to have the services of Amy Usowski as conservation agent and Nikki Smith as assistant agent. I think we have excellent professional and technical support from the town staff to help the commission do our jobs. So in 2020, the Conservation Department staff and Conservation Commission issued 90 administrative review permits for minor work in the outer buffer zones on properties, 29 determinations of applicability, 33 orders of conditions, 12 extension permits, and 29 certificates of compliance. 33 orders may not sound like a large number, but many of these applications required variances in multiple hearings and had levels of complexity that was at times difficult to manage. It's become clear to the Commission that changes to the Harwich Wetlands Protection Bylaw and regulations are needed to better protect our sensitive wetlands resource areas, which are public resources that we all benefit from. We've talked about this for a couple of years. It became clear this year we probably need to have some revisions to our bylaws and regulations, so I'll talk about that in just a minute. In terms of violations, we had an increase in 2019 and an increase again in 2020. We had 17 enforcement orders issued by the Conservation Department and/or Commission for activities occurring without a permit, such as clear-cutting trees and plants for views, installation of new docks or improper winter storage of permitted docks and floats, installation of hardscape features, and lawn fertilizing. These activities degrade our wetlands resource areas and buffer zones. The Commission issues fines when necessary, can require removal of offending structures, and require full mitigation for violations. Unfortunately, our fines at $300 per event really don't seem to be acting as a deterrent in all cases. So with this increasing trend, we're going to have to consider what we want to do to try to reverse that. With each case, we do take the opportunity to try to educate the offenders as to why their actions were in violation and what the impact of these actions might be on the wetlands. So this is something to keep an eye on in the future. We also have the care and custody of almost 1,000 acres of conservation land, where this includes much responsibility to manage the lands effectively. This year we had some issues. We had encroachment from abutting properties. We had unauthorized vehicle uses on trails. There was some vandalism. There was other acts that had negative influences on these conservation lands. We did receive funding from the Community Preservation Act to purchase fencing, signs, and other items that will help manage these properties more effectively. There was also good coordination with the police department and the DPW with some of these issues. So these items will be purchased this coming winter and installed soon thereafter. So that's the general report. I do want to add a couple items that are really beyond the routine review and public hearings that we deal with every year. And so the first one of those items is to do with working on revision of our bylaws on docks and piers. We have really struggled with the permitting of new docks during my 4 terms on the commission. Most new applications for docks have been approved under variances, but we rarely have consensus, and we also don't really have consensus on impacts of these structures. Also, the interest and motivations of property owners who seek to have docks has grown. We're seeing more interest in sites that were once considered marginal. And also, concern has risen over boating densities and cumulative impacts in specific locations like the Herring River, which is absolutely a natural resource gem for the town of Harwich. So we think the revisions of dock and pier bylaws are necessary. We hope they'll clarify requirements for both the applicants and the commission. We also think it should provide an opportunity for discussion and maybe clarification on how we allow dredging in some of our harbor areas where it's probably appropriate to remove some of those sediments. Number 2, our present bylaws and regulations require mitigation for various developments in the buffer zone. And so the mitigation often takes the form of a 2-to-1 or a 1-to-1 square footage mitigation for changes in those areas. When you've got properties that are developing pristine areas, there's often little option for on-site mitigation. And so we struggled in the past year on whether, do you consider denying projects or do you relax the requirement for mitigation, which may not seem fair to some folks. So we're pursuing an in lieu fee option where the bylaw would allow off-site mitigation for particular cases. And so this will provide essential options to better protect our sensitive wetlands areas and to make the application process clearer for applicants. So we hope to get support from the Board of Selectmen on those two bylaw changes, which should be coming up fairly soon. Number 3, we spent much time this year discussing and planning the management of the Bell's Neck conservation land off of Depot Street. This has been a tough issue for a number of years. There's a lot of support to continue leasing those bogs for cranberry farming, very important cultural features for the town of Harwich. And we heard support for this from the Board of Selectmen as well. We went through a stepwise process, putting the bogs out to bid in 2018. We received a single bid, which was not considered sufficient. And then subsequently, we had 3 public hearings to discuss options. The Conservation Commission voted recently to not put the bogs out again for agricultural leasing, with options to pursue for active management, naturalization of parts of the bog, and then the potential for cooperative and educational farming. The preferred option will be integrated into a revision of the management plan for the property, which will be advanced in 2021. And the intent is to work with the Natural Resource Department and Cape Cod Mosquito Control to manage water flow in the bogs, and then work with the Conservation Department, the DPW, and the Natural Resource Department to better manage the bogs as conservation land for the protection of natural resources and public access. And then finally, a project I've been working on as chairman is to try to advance a proposal to create an oyster reef in the Herring River. And this work is going on with the Conservation Department and the Natural Resource Department. We've had a proposal put together for about 2 years now. It's been vetted by several interested parties and regulatory experts. Pandemic certainly made it hard to start new projects like this, but we hope to make some progress in 2021, and we hope to have the support of the Board of Selectmen. So that's my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Brad. Any comments or questions for Brad? Brad, what's your, go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah, Brad, I just have a question because it occurs to me, I mean, you brought up the bog issue. The bog that's currently, I guess it's North Harwich, which Leo Kukunis is farming, that lease expires in August. And one of the things that goes on is that no decision is a decision when because the pump house is no longer eligible to be used if you let enough time go on with it being fallow. My question is, what's going on with that? Are we issuing a joint RFP again?
Leo came before us during one of the 3 public hearings for the Bell's Neck bog, and he discussed his interest. And I think he is interested in leasing that again. And so, you know, we will certainly discuss it and have a hearing before long. Amy, do you have any points to offer on the actual timetable for that?
I would suggest that we take this up early this spring. About a year ago, we had conversations with Mr. Kukunis when he had, you know, Great Swamp Bog, as well as what we call, sorry, can't remember, the bog that's off of the Main Street bog is what you're talking about. That is going to be up this coming summer. So we talked about both of them and talked about giving Leo plenty of heads up when there was going to be meetings and potential decisions made. So because we had such a long discussion with the Bell's Neck bogs and releasing, I would suggest late winter, early spring, was starting with that discussion.
The reason I brought that up is that starts creating another crisis if you wait too long, because an RFP has to be issued. You can't just renew the lease. In the spring, for something that expires in the beginning of August, I just have to point out to you, if he has to vacate, he has to pull the equipment out and take it and leave the property the way he found it. So I mean, and the town really needs to know what's going to happen, because it's no secret that we've had disagreements with the Conservation Commission, especially over the bog issue. When we bought some of these properties, we promised the public both conservation and historic cultural preservation to keep them as working bogs. So But again, no decision is a decision when you're talking about working properties. If they start to become fallow, it becomes a lot easier to just let them be fallow.
It's a good point.
Thank you, Don. Other comments? I just have one comment, and you know, I join in some as the other selectmen do as liaisons to committees. So I pay attention to Conservation, Board of Health, and a couple others. And our regulatory committees are doing a great job handling the permitting regulatory requirements over remote video, which is not easy. Trying to come up with fact sheets that people can review. Conservation has plans, site plans they're looking at. And quite frankly, oftentimes they're dealing with a public who's not comfortable using video conferencing. And so it takes a degree of patience to get everyone a chance to discuss a point. And as Brad said, they've had quite a few complex cases come in front of them. And so my hat's off to our committees and the staff and the committee and the volunteers that are making that happen.
Thank you, Larry.
Next, thank you, folks. Next is Board of Appeals. Dave Ryer, you're on the line, I see. You have to unmute yourself. Dave, you have to unmute.
There's a button at the bottom of your screen, Dave. Bring your cursor down all the way to the bottom, and
You're still muted.
How's that?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I'm in two locations here for some odd, I guess because I'm on the phone and the computer. Okay, good evening. In 2020, we had 42 applications, and in January, we always have some applications that would have carried over from 2019. That's why the numbers don't exactly jive. But we had 34 special permits granted. We had 9 variances granted. 4 cases were withdrawn. They generally involved situations where it appeared the board would not grant the requested relief and the applicant would withdraw to regroup. One of those was returned, and ultimately a variance was granted for the one that returned. And we had 1 modification of a special permit. During the year, we had 3 of our members leave the board, and I'd like to commend them for their service. Kathy Muller had been on the board for about 6 years. Jim Hilliard had been on about 4 years, and they were both regular members. And Mike Capoli was one of our alternate members, and Mike had been on 2 or 3 years. So right now that leaves us with 5 members. We have 3 regular members and 2 alternates. I have recommended that the 2 alternates, Brian Sullivan, who was appointed in March of 2020 as an alternate, and Chris Murphy, who was appointed in June of 2020, both be made regular members. And hopefully we'll get some alternates. One fella, I've been talking to him on the phone, he has filed the paperwork, and that should be before the selectmen. Tom Drake is filed to be an alternate member. So that will give us 1 backup member. All the members have been sworn in and received ethics training. And we do post our agendas and minutes monthly on the town website. And that's about it. I will be happy to answer any questions.
I think, Don, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I'm actually the liaison. Dave and I've had a conversation about this. Dave, just to reiterate, you can make a recommendation, but they have to put just because they're alternates doesn't make them automatically candidates. And if you recall, you tried having us promote Mike Capoli, and he was missing in action. We would have promoted somebody who wasn't actually going to be active anymore. All I need from them, and I checked the office this past week, is a request, a citizens activity form to become a full member. And I have no problem with interviewing them as quick as I can, but they haven't done anything.
Okay, I've asked them 3 times, and they've told me 3 times they have done it. So I don't know where the disconnect is, but I will ask them again, Don. But I've been around this 3 times with them already, because we've had one position open since May, so I've been, anxious to fill it. I tell these guys every month that I'm trying to get them, recommending them to become regular members. So I will ask them once more, but they claim they contacted the selectman's office and did whatever was required. So I don't know any more than that, Don.
The newest citizens activity forms we have for them are the original ones before they got appointed as alternates. The only thing that wouldn't make this a full, flat-out 4-alarm fire for me is that, unlike most other committees in this town, your alternates actually get to slide into the role of a full-time member and vote as if they were full members. But we need to fix it, and I would love to be able to elevate them, but that still creates a problem where there's a vacuum. You don't have enough people, even as alternates, that function properly. So I'm hoping the public is hearing this. We need some serious people, because it affects people's property rights, and they're also the organization that consider 40B applications.
Well, as long as we have 4 members, we can act. We only need 4 to act on an application. My point is, in getting them moved up, if we don't move our alternates up, they might lose interest. And as you just said, the public is not beating down our door to join the Board of Appeal.
Well, let me suggest, Joe, could you ask your staff to maybe contact and see if they can work out if there's a communication issue?
Will do. We'll follow up tomorrow.
Okay.
I will send an email and ask them to file new activity forms.
And if you will copy Joe, then he can follow up from his side too.
Yeah, I'm not quite done yet, Larry.
Appreciate it, and I recognize with COVID, and the town hall is under restricted hours, and I'm sure that's where the issue is. Everything is sort of up in the air here with the COVID and restricted hours and restricted openings, so I appreciate that.
As a different subject, Dave, it's Don still. The ZBA, as I said, does 40B applications, and it came out, speaking about things people aren't participating in, it came out during the CPC last meeting when they were talking about the Housing Institute, the Community Development Partnership puts on, and we actually in part pay for, that they had approached the ZBA and no one was willing to actually attend that. I'm hoping I can get some sort of commitment that in the coming year, since there's going to be a need to have them review things, and at least a few of these people aren't really familiar, I would love them to be able to at least understand what their obligations are under that section of the law, because you're administering it.
Well, I've been doing it for 12 years, so I've been on the board 12 years, and we've done about 5 40Bs since I've been on, and I guess I'm still technically a lawyer, so I didn't feel I needed to attend it. I did.
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about, the other members that are newer.
Right. I did send it to them, and, I can't make them do it. Everybody's a volunteer.
Well, I suspect that's a question that's going to come up in interviews. So I'm just giving you a heads up.
There doesn't. We don't have people coming forward, Don. So I mean, you can be as harsh as you want, but if we
I don't
lose
consider it harsh. There's an obligation involved by the town's people who are agents of the town to actually do certain things, and that would be one of them.
Well, okay, but if we go down below 4 members, we won't be able to process cases. Okay, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, but I think that Don and Ed will have that discussion and encourage them to attend the courses. We'll we understand your problem getting a quorum as well. But training is an issue we have in our committee, so we're trying to be sure that we do what we can.
Yeah, we do make those courses available. There's a good process of sending them to our secretary, Shayla Delaney, and we make the board members aware of them, but it's up to them whether they attend or not.
Okay.
So nothing I can add to that.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Don. Any other comments or questions? If not, we'll move to the consent agenda. Michael, you wish to deal with this?
Yes, sir. Okay, I move that we approve the resignation of Leo G. Kakunis as Town of Harwich representative to CVAC Board effective immediately. I move that we approve the interim town administrator's recommendation to grant permission of N-Star Electric Company, DBA Eversource Energy, for the purpose to install approximately 1,620 feet of conduit and 4 manholes in a town road from manhole labeled 10-040 on the corner of Gilbert Lane to pole number 28-57 on South Street, and to install approximately 1,250 feet of conduit and cable and 4 manholes on a town road from manhole labeled 10-040 at intersection of South Street to pole number 107-6 on Gilbert as indicated on the plan number 4079745.
Second.
Any comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Joel, do
if I
you wish
may?
to weigh in? Because you had a comment that you wanted
I do know that from the hearing that I conducted last week on item number B regarding N-Star, we will have some comments and questions from the public. Bob Kingsbury from Harwich Golf. Bob, I don't know if you're on, but he did indicate through Jamie that he'd like to speak on this. So I would ask the board to hold that one aside for a moment if you could.
Okay. We have we can do that if, Michael, you wish to, and I think Don seconded that, can we postpone item B and vote on A right now?
Does Joe have a sense of what Mr. Kingsbury wishes to discuss on that? Seems pretty straightforward.
I do. There was a lengthy hearing. There's quite a bit of information. There are questions that were asked of staff, so I had directed everybody on the hearing to meet afterwards and to offer updates tonight. There's also my suggestion that this be approved subject to the site walk and review by staff and Eversource.
I would change my, Larry, if I may.
Sure.
I will change my motion to include pending staff review.
And I'll change my second to agree with that motion.
Okay, Link, are you here to comment on that one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly, Chris Nickerson, our road manager, met with Mr. Kingsbury out on site and walked the project today, and they have some recommendations on how we might be able to most of the concerns.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on item B.
Can I have a clarification, Larry?
Yes, please.
With that motion, can Joe withhold the ultimate approval conveying the contractor or the utility until we resolve what it is that Chris did?
That would be my read of the motion. Joe, do you agree?
Well, the hope was we've got Ronique Goldstein and her team from Eversource on the call. We were hoping that the board could hear the question that Mr. Kingsbury had and other abutters, and that you could adjudicate it tonight. If the board doesn't take it up tonight, I don't have the authority to sign the paperwork. The board would have to vote and sign the paperwork. So if you didn't take action tonight, we would be delaying the project and would have to bring it up separately. So,
well, even though it's consent, is there any reason we can't take those points now so we move on?
Well, that's what I was hoping to do.
Okay, let's do it now then.
Larry?
Yes,
Who's Ed?
go ahead.
In many of these applications, it's fairly evident from looking at the map that's provided that the purpose of the application is to provide sort of a cross-street underground connection for a residential property or something similar. In this application, the maps show extensive conduits going down major roads. I was just wondering what the purpose of the overall purpose of the project were, and maybe representatives from Eversource could just give us the thumbnail elevator speech on that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman,
you
if I
have to
could.
unmute yourself.
Yeah, we have Renee Goldstein from Eversource, and she can *6 or her microphone. She's ready to speak.
Hi, good evening, members of the board. Joe, thank you for calling upon me. This is Ronique Goldstein. I'm with Eversource Energy. I cover community relations for Cape Cod and the Vineyard and part of the South Shore, including the town of Harwich. The purpose of the project is reliability. So there is a radial line, a sole source circuit, if you will, that covers that area, that if it goes down during a storm event, we don't have a redundancy or an additional feed to pick up part of the load, meaning customers that are out. And so this additional line will be, will connect two circuits that are not otherwise connected, and we'll be able to reduce the number of folks that would be out normally. So it's 100% reliability. This area was defined having some poor performance, and so we wanted to connect and make the system more robust. That's the, in a nutshell, the purpose of the project. And we're doing this across Cape Cod in a variety of towns, including Falmouth, Mashpee, Chatham, as well as East Town. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I just, the question is, generally are most of these reliability projects done by undergrounding the utilities as opposed to doing it overhead?
It really depends on the area distribution system and what makes most sense and what's feasible. In this particular situation, it makes sense to do underground.
Thank you.
And if I could just interject, my name is Terry Porsanger. I'm the supervisor of rights and permits. I work with Rooney. There's a handful of projects that the company does like this. They are to the benefit of the residents in the community. As Rooney said, it provides a second source should the existing source be interrupted to keep the residents in the communities with power. We do a handful of these, and Harwich, this area here, was identified as an area that could benefit from such a project like this.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Go ahead, Joe.
as Link was saying before, the discussion we had last week is that staff was going to contact the abutters that had questions that were on the call. So, Link, if you or Chris Nickerson have updates on that, I think this would be the time to present those.
Thank you, Joe. I think I'll defer to Chris because since he was up and walked the whole project today.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair, through you. I did meet with Bob Kingsbury this afternoon on site. We looked at his concerns, which mainly involve shade trees, very mature maple trees that run along the east side of South Street, parallel to the sixth hole on the Harwich Golf Course. The concern for that is the excavation process that will be taking place, as well as the installation of two 10 foot by 6 foot by 8 foot vaults underground, which will severely damage, if not destroy, these trees. After discussing this with Bob, we did come up with a possible way to permit this process to continue and protect the town's investment in these shade trees, as it was the previous tree warden, Link Thatcher, who planted these trees, and the town purchased them years ago. And that would be through the process of horizontal directional drilling, which would allow Eversource to install their conduit underneath these trees without having to excavate and damage the root system between the tree and the edge of South Street. We also have a couple drainage systems right in the area that I have a little concern about, but I know I'm confident that I could meet with the contractor on site and make sure that provisions are taken care of to protect those. Realistically, I believe, most of this is workable. I think that, we can protect the neighborhood's value with those mature maples through a different process of installing the pipe work that they'll eventually pull the cable through. And, I'd be happy to meet Eversource, their contractor, whomever their designee would be at any time during the work week out there, and go over this process to make sure that it is something that they can do. The only other concern the highway department would have here is the protection of our new surface on Doane Road. It's still under a 5-year pavement cut moratorium. So we would ask that while they have that horizontal directional drill on site, that they use that to get underneath our new pavement on Doane.
Larry, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
So the hearing brought up some of these issues, but I also didn't want to delay this going before the board because I didn't want to delay the project if we can come to agreement. We want to get this project started so it can get completed before the spring and summer months. So that's why I asked the board to hear those presentations.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Michael?
Yeah, Larry, the motion covers staff involvement, and I think Chris has a great handle on this. So there's no reason we can't move forward on this. And I'm seeing the head shakes from the Eversource representatives. So if the staff doesn't agree, in the end, it comes back before us. So there's no reason we can't vote on this tonight and then turn it over to staff and move on.
So then if I may,
Excuse me.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Oh, excuse me if I may, could we just, for the record, get a member of Eversource to agree that this is a potential solution to the problem? So we have it on record?
Well, I think the motion now is, certainly from our perspective, you can. I think the motion, as Michael stated, leaves it in your hands and staff to sort this out with Eversource so you're comfortable with it before you move ahead.
Larry, Chris's point is you've got a representative here. You would like her to actually say that she's committing to this on the record.
Yeah, I need Rainey for a verbal more than a head shake.
So, Joe, did you want to say something, Joe?
Yes.
I see Joe raising his hand too. Did you want to say something, Joe?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, no objection with the way this is proceeding, except that under the poll location hearing laws, if the board votes this, you can defer to staff, but the board still has the responsibility of filing the paperwork with the town clerk that then gets filed with Eversource. So it wouldn't be as simple as the board saying for staff to handle it, because the board would still have to commit to the paperwork, the certifications and the attestations. So there is another element to this. We can continue it if you want.
You're saying that we can start it tonight, but it still has to come back to us for final approval. Is that correct?
Unless the board is willing to vote the motion as presented and sign the documents. But the project can't proceed without the documents.
Let me go back to Verizon. Rainey, can you give us, are you okay with these suggestions from Chris?
So are you asking me?
Yes, Ronit.
Yeah, Ronit. So what I did want to say is that I spoke with Bob Kingsbury this afternoon. We had a good conversation. I attended the hearing on Friday. And we are looking at other options of constructing this piece of conduit, potentially on the other side of the road, on the side of the poles. That's one option that the engineering team is looking at. We can have a site visit is an easy ask. We would be doing a site walk and field checks regardless. And we're happy to meet with Link, with Chris, with members, with Bob and other interested parties to walk the site as you did today, Chris, and just talk through the project with the contractor. With regard to HDD, the horizontal directional drilling, I can't speak to whether that's a feasible option. That's something I will bring back, and Terry can as well, to the team, and we can entertain that option as well, just to see if it's feasible. I know we do conduct HDD for other conduit projects. I'd have to check with the engineers and the contractor as to whether that can be done in this case. But we are, we'd like to work collaboratively and do a positive project and in a positive way, and leave you all in a good place. So that would be my overall statement, if that's helpful.
I think right now I'm relying on Chris and Link and Joel to their comfort level. Then we would call for a vote.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask one more question to Ronnie Goldstein. What about the placement of your utility in close proximity to gas mains and water mains? Because you have conflicts reading some of the dig safes out there already.
I know we will dig safe it as is the standard, and that we would, take caution next to other facilities as we do with any other project. We have other sensitivities in other towns where it's natural heritage issues, and so we will take all the precautions and follow, the standards of DPW in the town.
Yes, ma'am. My question was, can you place your utility underground in close proximity to a gas main or a water main?
I don't know
if you maintain certain separations, there's certain requirements that we would need to place our facilities from. If it's a water main, if it's a gas line, we would follow those standards.
Yeah, the water is usually a lower depth, 4 to 5 feet, whereas we're more shallow. But I agree with Terry that I don't know off the top of my head the standards that we have to adhere to, but we would follow those standards as well, as far as distance from other utilities.
I understand that. I looked at some of the dig safes out there today, and you do have some conflicts, as I'm sure you expected and planned on. So I'm just, trying to picture in my mind placement and how this is all going to work out, having seen some of the conflicts that already exist. But again, this is something we can address in a site walk, which I'd be more than happy to make myself available at your convenience.
That'd be great. Exactly. I think, we'll all be, and I mentioned this to Bob Kingsbury earlier today, we'll all be smarter and more informed, kind of getting our eyes on everything in the field and not just on paper or pictures.
Absolutely.
Larry?
Joe, final comments?
I'll defer to Selectman McCaskill before that.
Larry,
I think that was it. Go ahead.
Larry, if Don's willing, I'll add to my motion and allow for the interim town administrator to sign. And if the interim town administrator, this is part of the motion, but that piece I would add to my motion. And then for comments on that, before Don's second, if Joe doesn't sign it, it comes back to us anyway. But I have full faith that Eversource, Chris, Link can figure this out. If they can, it comes back to us. So I would add to the motion to allow Joe to sign the final document.
I think Joe mentioned that we have to sign it to move ahead.
Correct. Under the statutes for pole locations, which are almost described as ancient, that can only be done by the Board of Selectmen in the town. It cannot be devolved to anybody else.
So Joe, can Larry sign that as the chair?
I think we have a motion in a second, and it sounds to me like people are willing to walk it together and work it out. So there's no other comments. I'm ready for a vote.
Yeah, Larry, I do have one.
Okay, Don.
Yeah, in support of what Michael's trying to accomplish here with language, but the only problem I have is that the contractor who actually does this, and I'm assuming it's not going to be actual Verizon trucks or Eversource trucks, it's going to be a contractor that will perform this work. They would have a contractual relationship with the company, the utility company, not with us. So I fail to see how, if we agree with what they have requested, how we can modify anything.
Well, if you don't mind, Joe, or Chairman, the contractor is working on our behalf. So essentially, they're working on behalf of Eversource. And so we hold them, their feet to the fire, if you will. We hold them to the standards that we've committed to.
Only to the extent that you've agreed to it. That's my point. We haven't actually agreed to what we're talking about.
So if I could make a suggestion, I've been through a number of these hearings, and you could approve it subject to a satisfactory site visit with the staff. And then it does defer to their preference and their recommendations, and we work through those issues together. I've seen that be voted on by a board.
I think that was basically Michael's motion.
The only difference, Larry, if I could, is this is not the hearing. The hearing occurred last week. So the question before the board is whether to accept the application as presented or not. So given where the motion's at and where the discussion's at, you know, the effort was to have a broader discussion for the benefit of the abutters. At this point, I would respectfully ask that the board take the matter and table it.
If I may, before you speak, sir,
yes.
I have a level of confidence that between myself, Lincoln Hooper, Eversource, and their contractor, that we can come to a very workable agreement on this situation. I would like to see this happen before a season where it's going to interfere with the business of the golf course or the business of the town of Harwich. And I don't feel uneasy with anything going forward. I just wanted for the record that there was going to be some cooperation from Eversource.
Okay.
And I feel like I got it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Larry Canap?
Mr. Chair?
Ed?
Yeah, you know, I find the motion we have is basically indicates that it's based, moving ahead is based on this successful site visit with Eversource and the staff, and I have all the confidence in the world of our staff to see that our concerns that have been raised are met in the completion of this project, and I'd urge that we vote to approve this tonight.
Thank you, Ed. I think we're ready for a vote of the motions been made and seconded. Michael?
Larry, the only comment I would make is that based on what Joe said, that it is that I would add to the motion and authorize the chair to sign.
Is that acceptable?
I believe it is. I think it's appropriate. The clerk of the board would have to attest to the vote of the board, and then the document itself could be signed by the chair on behalf of the board. So
Michael, that puts it in your lap. That sounds good to me.
Okay,
Don, you second that?
I did. I mean, I agreed to the extent that the clerk of the board is Michael, and I'm sure that he will make sure that there's peace in our time.
Yes, thank you. I'm ready for a vote.
Okay, Michael?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Who did I miss? Ed?
Aye.
If Ed votes twice, does that mean I can't vote?
That means you can't vote. Don?
Yeah, aye.
Thank you. And I'm an aye. Sorry about that, Don. I lost track. Okay, thank you. We'll move on. And Chris and Link and Joel, thanks very much for this. And
You're welcome.
obviously good to have you on the line too, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Put your face in Link, so we have to be sure that happens.
Therese, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Before we leave the consent agenda, I did want to, I'm sure as all our board members do, wish to thank Leo Kakunis for his efforts on the CVEC board, the electrical board. He spent a lot of time, and I have a note. We need to ask him who he'd recommend as his replacement. That'll be a different discussion.
Larry?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mike.
Michael?
Okay, I was going to say the name Valerie Bell comes up quite often, and when I spoke to Leo about his resignation, he mentioned her name as well. Obviously, this has to go through the interview committee,
Right.
Or at least I believe it does. But Valerie Bell is very involved and well known to the CVEC people, and I think that she'd be a great choice.
Good. Thank you. Yes, Ed?
One issue, I have a voice message from Valerie that I need to return that I haven't been able to. And I'm assuming it's about that issue. Well, I know it is, but so we'll be, Don and I will be in contact with her as part of the nominations committee.
Okay, she'd be a great nomination, so hopefully her voicemail is showing interest.
Well, Larry, my only comment is I go to church with her. I know her really well, but I've been saying this for weeks now over all sorts of different vacancies. I just need, even with a phone call, I just need to make sure we've got a record on a piece of paper that shows that she actually requested this.
Well, you've made that point, Don. I think we all agree. She needs to go ahead and fill out the form so we can go through the proper process.
With anything else, but when I shall pass and you do also, we need to be able to go into the office and see some evidence about how things came to pass.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Don.
Second issue, Larry.
Okay, Ed.
Well, in doing the consent calendar, we sort of took up the matter of the Eversource application separately and made a special motion on that. Yes. I just want to be sure that we consider that we actually voted for all the other items on the consent agenda.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, if I may, the motion I heard was to approve item A and item B subject to the other matters. So I believe Selectman McCaskill handled all of those items.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Moving then to new business. I see we have Dr. Carpenter and Mr. McMillan, probably some other school, Terry Russell, but can we start with your presentation, please? And I will, before I hand the floor over to you, comment because this is, we've had some lengthy meetings, and I did ask Dr. Carpenter if he would streamline the discussion because we do have a full packet and hit the high points on that. I would also state that the school committee will be back in front of us several times, so I'm not sure I'd rather not get into an in-depth debate tonight over the issues, but instead, if there are issues or comments come up, raise those so they can come back to us and we will work through this process. So with that, Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Larry. I'll just share my screen so that we can at least have a little visual to go along with this. So, given that we are, in January here, this is a, very much a draft budget. There still are a lot of unknowns when it comes to, to the Monomoy budget for FY22. If we just take a high-level overview here, the long-term effects of the COVID pandemic as they will impact our schools is still to be determined. We are anticipating, given some of the vaccination timelines that Megan's talked about with you and that you've seen in the media, that that I anticipate we will be, back in sort of a normal, very much with air quotes, mode as we go into the next school year. But again, it's hard to really get a full impact on how the pandemic is going to really affect the schools and our budget. And there's so there's some unknowns out there. We know that there has been a declining number of children in both Chatham and Harwich, but the decline continues to be faster in in Chatham relative to Harwich, and that has had some fiscal impacts with this budget in the past years, and as we project into the next year, as it will create a situation where the minimum required contribution will continue to shift towards Harwich. And I know that we have been working with the select boards to look at coming up with a fiscal solution for this in the short term. There is an overall reduction of staffing behind this budget that really corresponds to a reduction in students. But the budget does maintain all existing programs and services at all grade levels. In terms of developing the budget, we want to make sure that we are developing a budget that supports our mission statement and our strategic plan. We budget class sizes at the elementary level to be around 18 students, averaging across the classrooms. At the middle and high school level, 19 students. And we want this budget to be transparent, data-driven. We strive to work with the boards and our school councils and our community to put together what those needs are. But we also want to be very cognizant of what the fiscal wherewithal is with our two towns as we put together the final budget. And do acknowledge that these are unique times with the pandemic, and so we look forward to hearing really where Joe and Carol see the town budget in Harwich. There are some assumptions behind this budget. The first is that that the enrollment we assume is going to be fairly level. We do anticipate it's going to be dropping off at the elementary level, but we continue to see an increase at the high school level. So we will be shifting services or shifting some staffing that direction in this budget. There are no changes in the services at the lower grade levels, even though there is some reduction in staffing. As I said, there's been that long-term shift in minimum required contribution that has been heading towards Harwich because of enrollment changes. But we don't have information on what the Chapter 70 numbers are going to be coming from the state, nor do we know what that minimum required contribution is. Those will get set a little bit in the next few weeks, but we don't have those yet. Both the town of Chatham and the town of Harwich have heard from the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group, and we have shifted our placeholder for health insurance increase to 5% in this budget iteration. I think when we initially sent a packet to the select board, it was at 10%, and we got some we'll call it good budget forecasting that we shifted that from 10 to 5, and that's a pretty appreciable change in some of the assumptions behind this, because health insurance is a major driver in any budget. As I said, the enrollment trends, blue line is the high school. The high school is the one building that we anticipate enrollment's going to continue to go up. The sort of largest cohort in the district right now is currently at 8th grade. There's some pretty big cohorts behind it that are coming out of the middle school, and that's going to drive our high school enrollment, which is hovering around 680 right now, and push it right up to 700, which is what the building was really built for, that maximum enrollment of 700. And I anticipate as we look out over the next couple of years, we'll see the high school exceed that 700 by just a little bit and then slowly taper down. Some of the key drivers here in the last few fiscal years are intensive needs special education out of district placements have been rather challenging with behind the budget. We actually anticipate them to be fairly stable looking into the upcoming fiscal year, and the circuit breaker reimbursements increasing. School choice, we continue to be a school district where families want to see their children coming. So we're seeing the school district continues to hold on to a lot of its own students. We see a lot of families wanting to come here. We also don't know what the long-term ramifications of COVID are going to be on some of the school choice trends seen in our district and around the Cape. We have level funded a number of things, ranging from the custodial supplies, but again, we have a placeholder in there for some addition of custodial supplies just to deal with some of the building cleaning that needs to happen behind a pandemic. We've needed to increase the substitute line. And again, I think it's both, I think we've needed to up that historically, but again, particularly given COVID, and if there's lingering effects out there, we're going to need support on that end. We do have our utilities budgeted with a 0% increase. There are some staffing that we're carrying behind this budget that has, that has a little residual bit of COVID in there. We're carrying a little bit of additional nursing support going into next year. We've really had to greatly increase the nursing support this year, and our nurses have been flat out working with Megan Eldridge and Judy Giorgio over in Chatham just to support us keeping our buildings open for in-person learning. And, and we have made a number of changes within the budget to really support strategic initiatives in each of the buildings and to support a strong educational program. There are capital needs that are addressed behind this budget. One of those is we have an aging phone system in all of the buildings except the high school. So we're looking at phasing in new phone systems. There's some repairs that need to happen at Harwich Elementary School, at the middle school, that we're taking care of in this. And we have needs to replace one of our vans, which we use for our intensive needs special education programs. We need to get that replaced so that we can serve those students' needs. And each year we have a number of different things that we do to go and upgrade and refresh our technology, which is one of those things I was glad going into the pandemic that we had a school district that was really well placed and well positioned to go and be virtual if necessary. This budget continues to allow us to be able to do that by refreshing some of the technology that that is starting to age out. Getting to the punchline that everybody wants after that the 30,000-foot view, we are looking at a 1.5% increase in this budget over FY21. Which is actually a pretty impressive place to be. If you look at the percent increases in budgets over the past years, 1.5% is one of the smallest budget increases. Last year it was a 1.3% when we were presenting to you. But keep in mind that 1.3% had a 0% of a placeholder for a health insurance increase. So this one is 1.5%. It has a 5% placeholder there for a health insurance increase. So this is probably one of the the best budgets in terms of percent increases that the district has had since we've fully regionalized. And again, there are a lot of unknowns at the moment. We don't know what Chapter 70 is going to look like, particularly how Chapter 70 is going to play out when COVID, student enrollment has a lot to do with what the Chapter 70 money comes. With COVID, we've seen a large number of families have opted to homeschool, not just at Monomoy, but across the state. So you're seeing enrollment down across the state, and that I think may impact Chapter 70, but we don't know yet. We don't know what the reimbursement is going to be looking like for charter school, school choice funding, or transportation as yet, and we don't know where that minimum required contribution is going to be. In terms of the assessments on the two towns, the assessment is largely based on that 3-year rolling average of foundation enrollment. If we look at the minimum required contribution, which the state sets each year, it has been sliding towards Harwich ever since FY18. The minimum required contribution is based on, at least on the state side, an instantaneous look at where foundation enrollment is. So as we've seen Chatham's enrollment slowly go down, the way the minimum required contribution has swung towards Harwich progressively. And so we have tried to account for what that might look like when we get to some of the assessment slides in another minute or two here. So the 3-year rolling average based on the foundation enrollment finds us now at a 75.11% Harwich, 24.89% Chatham. Just that 1 year shift from last year, it was a 74.35% Harwich. That shift from 74.35 to 75.11% is $150,000 shift alone in the assessment from Chatham towards Harwich. So that gives you a feel for what in any particular year that enrollment shift might look like. So if we calculate the assessment and take the minimum required contribution using what the minimum required contribution was last year, we anticipate that the overall assessment increase for Harwich would be a 2.9% assessment increase. Harwich's assessment would go up using the minimum required contribution from last year, taking that off the overall budget with the transportation assessment, the capital assessment, the debt assessment. So 2.9% for Harwich. Chatham's assessment would be a 0.78 assessment. Again, the difference there is that difference in the enrollments that are playing out between the two towns. And again, here, this is something that has bit us a bit in the last couple of years. And so Katie and I would come and present a draft assessment, and then we get the minimum required contributions, and they keep shifting towards Harwich and benefiting Chatham. So what Michael has done here is created a slide just sort of anticipating what that minimum required contribution might look like based on the trends over the last few years. So we anticipate rather than the minimum contribution being the same as last year, we anticipate that it's going to be a little higher for Harwich, a little less for Chatham. So a more realistic assessment increase for Harwich is probably a 3.2%, and in that range, in the low threes, based on the trends over the last few years. The last slide that we have here is really just looking at the conversations that we have been having recently with a working group in terms of what if we worked towards an alternative assessment method, and if we were to work towards an alternative assessment method, and there's a proposal out there to realistically find a way to have this happen early in the FY22 process. It could actually look like a 1.3% increase for Harwich and about a 5.8% increase for Chatham if we were to adopt in both towns an alternative assessment method that here has the towns as I had proposed at the before the school committee and spoke to your board last week. If each of the towns were actually to pay for their own elementary school, you'd see this a shift there in what that assessment could be for FY22. But again, there's a lot of work that has to be done to get from here to there, and as we come before your board in the next few weeks to talk about how we go about this process of revising a regional agreement to potentially get to to that, we'll kind of hopefully bring more clarity to the process. So that's the quick overview of the Monomoy budget. There's a lot of information still to be determined. Health insurance, that 5% placeholder is a big item. I'd love to see 3 years of a 0% from Cape Cod Municipal Health Group. Don't know yet, but that could be something would greatly help the budget if it does come through. There's still a lot of unknowns with what the state budget's going to look like, particularly given the age of COVID that we're living through. And then again, how these regional agreement conversations take place between the two towns has a huge impact on what the fiscal impact of the school district will be on the town of Harwich and Chatham next year.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions, comments from the board?
Larry, Steve Ford.
Yes, Steve.
Scott, I know that in our working group session that we had this past Friday, there was an indication that it would be too soon for us to address the economics of this in the May town meeting. I still think, and I'll leave it to my colleagues to comment as well, that I think we would like to see Chatham coming back to us with some idea of if there's a possibility they could be helpful to us on the economic side sooner rather than later, not waiting until the fall, but perhaps in the spring. And I know that you had felt that because there needs to be some approvals from the state or the governing bodies, that might not be possible. But I had gotten a sense from Chatham in previous meetings that they understood the situation that Howard found itself in as a result of the cost of the Chatham Elementary, and that I think it certainly seemed that they were somewhat sympathetic to what is happening to us on the economic side. So I would just say that if there is any way for us to continue to discuss the possibility of softening the impact on the town of Harwich sooner rather than later, I think we would all be supportive of that. And I'll leave that open to my colleagues on the board to comment as well.
Thank you, Steve. Any comments, Scott?
Yeah, I think from the school committee standpoint, we're gonna, we'll work with both towns and try to find a way to make it happen as soon as we can. But I think there's a lot of work that has to be done in a short period of time, and the one factor that we don't control is ultimately anything that we any sort of agreement that we come up with that we're going to put before town meeting, we have to send to the Department of Education and have the commissioner sign off on it. And our experience on that has been that it is not a quick sign off. We may be waiting, weeks for something like that to happen, which, I think I'm concerned, and I know that our district's legal counsel is concerned that there might not be enough calendar between now and Springtown meeting.
Scott, can I push back a bit on that? Does the financial, just giving some equity in terms of $560,000, can't that be done outside of the agreement? Yeah, we did that last year, as a fact, on the free cash issue that we managed to make it a little more equal outside of the agreement, just as a financial matter. That's not, is that possible?
I think when we consulted with our legal counsel and he did some research, his thinking, and I think Chatham's town council, is that that the appropriate course is to actually seek amendment of the regional agreement to have it happen. I think there likely needs to be a good conversation between boards. I think a suggestion that had come out of, I think the last meeting that we, a working group meeting that we had, is that it may behoove everyone to pull together a joint board in the upcoming weeks that would have, have the school committee and the two select boards talking together about, one common, I think mutually beneficial thing to address.
Terry?
Thanks, Larry. Terry Russell, member of this working group for the school committee. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I'll echo Scott and Steve's comment. I think the conversation in the past two workshops with this working group, clearly from the Harwich contingent, signals as fair and yet as swift a resolution to this issue that it is not a brand new issue. It's something that's been kicked around for 2.5 years. So I think there are colleagues on the Chatham board as well as their town manager. They're very aware. Now, I'm not. Scott is certainly far more into with our town council the requirements of the agreement regarding a vote in September and all. That being said, I think the signal, and it will continue as far as I'm concerned, to be raised with the Chatham reps from the working group, that this really needs to be as swiftly, as agreeable as everyone can make it.
Thank you, Terry. Other comments? Don?
Thank you, Larry. I know I'm speaking to the choir, and I really very much appreciate trying to get ahead of this with the working group. I know I have a lot of faith myself in Stephen, but just from the other perspective, I am not saying anything really new, that if the formation of this regional school district had ensued with a wraparound discussion about, well, we're going to have 75 to 80% of the costs, and the other town is only going to have 15 or 20. I don't think it would have passed both town meetings. Would I be happy to be in the other situation? Yeah, sure, because not taking an action benefits them as the enrollment steadily declines, so they get to hold the school open. That's pretty costly, as you pointed out, without any discussion about whether or not they're willing to pay for that privilege. That's not sustainable, and I sure as hell don't want to see us get into a situation culturally that Dennis and Yarmouth have, where there's pitched battles that occur, and there have actually been budgets that have been turned down at town meeting. We need to come to some sort of resolution, and Larry's right. It's the Latin tempus fugit. I mean, they absolutely have to have a meeting at some point with us, and we have to hash out a reasonable conclusion to this, because it just isn't sustainable within the context of our budget message. Your increase is going to have to be found as an underfunding of something on the municipal side to come out to a total that the taxpayers can afford without an override. So the ultimate, and again, I know I'm preaching to the choir. I appreciate your efforts in all of this to recognize the problem, but something has to give in terms of an actual solution.
Thank you, Don. Other comments? If not, we'll leave it there. As again, Scott and Ms. McMullen and Dr. Carpenter, someone else want, is that you, Steve?
No.
Go ahead.
No, nothing from me, Larry. I'm done.
Okay. We'll leave it there. I think this is your, you have the working group. You were here last week and now this week. I think we appreciate your work on the budget. We all know our concerns now, as you've said and Terry said, and our group. So our chore now is to see if we can work it out, which is what your presentation is. So, and Joe, I think that I'll leave it to you for any final comments.
Well, I think the thing I just want to emphasize, as Dr. Carpenter mentioned, is, whether we've met as the subgroup or the monthly group where it's Carol and I joining our counterparts from Chatham with Scott and Michael, I think the time has come for the three entities, being the town of Harwich, town of Chatham, and the school district, school committee, excuse me, is to really start vetting dates for a possible joint meeting and just bring all three parties together sooner rather than later.
I agree with that. I'd like some comfort from the present working group that there's a format for that, so it's just not free for all. That it's a well-defined agenda, so we have a good discussion.
Larry, this is Tina Gaines. Do you mind if I just say something?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to stress that the working group recognizes, and I wanted to echo what Joe Powers just said, it's extremely important, and this was discussed a little bit on Friday when we met, that we do need all three entities at the table, and the boards of selectmen from Chatham, Harwich, and the school committee, because I agree. I think the time has come that we all have to sit around the table and talk about this rather than talk through each other. It's just really, really important. And I was here last week and I stressed that this was a goal of the school committee this year to make sure that we're getting everybody around the table. We're all working from the same information. And it is a priority for the school committee to get that done. So I just wanted to echo what Joe just said. I think it's imperative that we do have a joint meeting.
Thank you, Tina. So I guess we'll conclude this by leaving it with you, Joe, and Jill from Chatham and Scott to organize the meeting then. Is that correct?
We can certainly have follow-up discussions for sure.
Okay. Thank you all. And we'll move on to the next agenda item then, which is the Cape Cod Tech. Is Bob Sanborn here? I don't.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know Aaron Orcutt, the business manager, and Aaron, I apologize if I'm getting the title wrong. I know she's here with us this evening, and Superintendent Sanborn called me earlier to say that he may be delayed, but he did expect to be present. I know he had a presentation with his finance group prior to this, but Aaron, not to put the spotlight on you, but if you're able to begin the discussion, we'd love to hear from Cape Tech.
I have no problem with that, Joe, putting the spotlight on her to start.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Chairman Ballantyne. Actually, Mr. Sanborn sends his regrets. He will not be able to join us this evening. He is tied up in another meeting. But as you referenced, Joe, we did meet with our finance subcommittee this afternoon at 4 o'clock, and the presentation that I'm going to share with you, if I can control the screen, would be what we presented to our school committee and or our finance committee, and it was recommended that we move forward with this. So I will take over this presentation. This budget for the FY22 that we're proposing was developed in consultation with our finance subcommittee. You can see the members there. We started the budget development in October of 2020. It's currently still in draft form, as I mentioned. We presented it at a prior meeting. It was approved, and it will be sent forward to our full committee at the end of this month for a presentation, then ultimately in February, hopefully for a vote to approve and to send to our towns. This budget for FY22 is based upon our enrollment as of October 1st, 2020, which is at 626 students. That is a 10-student increase over last year, but here in Harwich, it signifies a 7-student decrease. As you see, Harwich is 8.1% of our overall enrollment for the district, with Yarmouth and Barnstable really having about a little more than a 50% share as sending towns. But again, the 12 towns, sending towns compose our 626 student enrollment. As you can see, this is a brief history of the enrollment at Tech. We have had a steady increase in enrollment, but you will see in Harwich, it has actually been a steady decrease of student sending. having 77 in FY18, and then 4 years later, we're down to right now 51 students. But you do comprise 8.15% of our overall population. The FY22 budget. We are presenting to you a 1.99% budget this year. That is a $15,812,000 budget. It is an increase of 1.99, but I need to kind of go into a little bit of a history here. This past year for the FY21 budget, we had originally proposed and had voted by our towns a budget of $15,504,000, which represented a 2.76 increase over FY20. After COVID hit and we recognized the financial constraints from our sending towns, we thought it only prudent to try to see if we couldn't take another stab at reducing the budget, which we were able to do slightly. But in conjunction with that, we took another look at our revenue forecast last year, and we adjusted some of the state revenues. And I would like to highlight that we dedicated $775,000 from our excess and deficiency fund to offset this FY21 budget that we're currently in, recognizing that our towns were in a financial hardship. And so our goal, which we were successful in doing, was to level fund assessments in FY21. So FY21 assessments were identical to that of FY20. And so this FY22 budget represents a 1.99 increase over the original FY21 budget. Where does the money come from? Obviously, you know, 80% of the funding for our budget does come from member assessments, which totals about $12,650,000. We're able to come up with a minimal amount of local funding through interest generation and someday, hopefully, facility rental income, which leaves about 17% that is contributed from state aid through Chapter 70 and Chapter 71 transportation reimbursement. This is just a quick snapshot that shows you the blue line is our operating budget, and it's just a comparison to show you how really our state revenue and our local revenue shrinks as, unfortunately, the assessments, the charges back to our towns have to increase to offset the budget. A quick historical snapshot of our budget and the operating sources. Again, you will see $15,812,000 from our operating budget this year, where we expect to dedicate $465,000 in local revenue. Again, having nearly $400,000 from excess and deficiency to, again, offset assessments to local towns. The 1.99% increase would reflect a 1.47% increase in town assessments for the FY22 year if this budget was approved. So what is the money used for? Just a quick snapshot, and I'm actually going to click forward to the next slide. But just showing you what the major cost drivers of our budget are. Obviously, teacher salaries compose nearly 36% of our budget, but other big cost drivers are support services, which is what we call our special education support services at 9.1%. We have a significant special needs population. Over 24% of our students are special needs. And economically disadvantaged, we are into the 60s, about 65. So we do have a lot of high need students. Other major cost drivers of the budget are plant operations. We do have this brand new building, but we're still trying to work out the kinks of what our energy consumption is going to be, what our natural gas consumption will be, and the maintenance contracts associated with this new building. We are in the handoff stages with some of these contracts, but we have not obviously had a full year in the building to realize really all of the costs Something else to bring to your attention is insurance benefits. Again, a huge cost driver in the budget. Dr. Carpenter mentioned it as well. For us, it is about 10% of our budget. We are actually carrying a 1.5% increase in health insurance. Really what I am aiming for is to cover just a plan attrition, movement between plans. I am a member of the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group Board. I have been for 11 years now. We will have rate setting in about 3 weeks. I anticipate very, very low, if not a zero increase. Our fund balance for the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group has never been so healthy. So I say that, with the caveat that unless we have major double-digit increases in the predictions of the rates going forward, I truly believe, and I will be fighting for as a representative, to have a 0% increase. But again, it'll be about two to 3 more weeks before we know that for sure. Transportation is also another huge cost driver of our budget, especially this year. I know Dr. Carpenter has also experienced this too, increased busing costs. Right now, we're trying to get as many students as we can into the building, which is necessitating a lot of money being spent this year on additional transportation. But in the end, this is where the $15,812,000 comprises. And looking at our capital debt, as you can see, we will be going into our 3rd year of debt payments. This is the amount that is due next year, would be $6.2 million. With Harwich having an assessment of $509,639. I've been able to determine obviously what our capital assessments are going to be for FY22, but without our minimum contribution numbers from our 12 towns, I really can't predict what our operating assessment will be, except that with a 1.99% budget and a decrease in students from Harwich, going out on a limb, I can't expect we would have an increase in our assessment for the FY22 year. So again, that was a very brief presentation. I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but I am here to answer questions and try to figure out how to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Erin. I appreciate the very concise and rapid presentation. Are there comments or questions? Erin, I'm curious. What percent of your budget do you try to maintain your E&D funds at?
So we have been for years past, we had been at the higher end of our E&D, where we had been pretty close to the 5% allowable by threshold. That being said, we have significantly used that in an effort to offset the burden to our towns. So we are now probably in a 3% range, but with this year's budget, and we had decreased our revenue forecasts, thinking that we were going to see a lot of cuts this year, which did not materialize. So we do expect a lot of that excess revenue to go back into E&D, and we hope to continue to maintain that dedication. We would like to get back up to a more reasonable number. Again, we really took a hit this year, but we thought it was more important to give some relief to our sending towns.
Thank you, Erin. Other questions or comments? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Send my regards to Bob, but since he's not here and you are, this is a pretty annual event on my part. Aside from the budget, if there hadn't been a Jimmy Marceline, there wouldn't have been a tech school. And I've been trying to portray to him just how important that was and to our community. I know you got a new building, but not a single part of it, to my knowledge, is named for him. Even if it was the portico in the entrance of the school, it's really something I'm not going to let go of because the guy was an icon in this community and he deserves some permanent recognition as such. It's not just if we start doing it for him, we'll do it for other people. There wouldn't have been a tech school. So I don't know how more emphatically to say it, and I don't want to take up everybody's time, but I only get a couple opportunities a year to prod him. So if you could mention this to him.
I absolutely will, Don. I've definitely heard the comment before. I've been the business manager for the tech for over a decade, so this is not new to me. And Mr. Marcelon, we would not be where we are without he and the folks that he worked with to make Cape Cod Tech a reality. And we would not be here without the support of your town and the other 11 towns to move forward in his honor and educate another group of students for the next 50 years in this building. But I will absolutely bring back your remarks to Mr. Sanborn.
A plaque would be nice.
Don certainly speaks for the board in this matter. It's not an individual statement. Other comments? Joe, as always, I'll leave if you have any final comments on this.
I would just say thanks to Aaron for an exceptional job, and Bob Sanborn owes you at least a cup of coffee for a great job tonight. Thank you for the presentation.
And our regards to Bob as well. Thanks, Aaron.
I will.
Next on the agenda is the Town of Harwich preliminary 2022 operating budget. And Joe, I assume you'll lead this.
I will, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I will strive to be briefest of all as I share my screen. There we go. The purpose tonight was knowing that we had these presentations from the preliminary budgets of both Monomoy and Cape Tech. At great anxiety to our finance director, I asked to have a high-level preliminary document prepared as a look-in for where we're at right now for the town of Harwich. Because of the conversations you just heard, and before I go any further, I want to emphasize it was great to hear Aaron's presentation, not only on behalf of Cape Tech, but as Michael McMillan, as Carol Coppola will tell you, we are anxiously awaiting those numbers from the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group. And as Scott mentioned earlier, we did reduce our assumptions from 10% to 5%. So if there's further relief to come from those rates from Cape Municipal Health Group on health insurance, it'll be certainly welcomed and great news for us. Because, Mr. Chairman and members, as you can see, what I'm sharing on the screen is the document that was sent to you folks early this morning that we'll have added to the public materials. But I want to emphasize the headline here that this is a preliminary draft, certainly subject to a detailed review by me and certainly further vetting by Carol. But I wanted to take a peek in for the board to see where we're at, because in a month's time, I am required by charter to present you with a comprehensive budget message. And so you can see where we're at presently on some assumptions on revenue projections and sources of funds. Scrolling down on that page, you have heard some discussion about health insurance. You know, that 4.7% you see there is a blended rate that covers not only what Erin's talking about, but also health insurance for retirees. But our number there is overall based on a 5% health insurance increase. So again, if that comes down, as Erin suggested it may in the next 3 weeks, you'll see that number come down as well. But you can see here what's an articulation of what we consider to be the fixed costs, if you will. And then the two school departments that just presented their preliminary numbers. And so, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, what that means today as a snapshot is that, as you'll see in a moment, despite the great efforts of our department heads, with quite a bit of cajoling from the finance director to remind everybody, remember that we're working on a budget that is level funded by the direction of the board. And I want to just share for a moment again, just a recap for everybody of what that means. The definition of level funded, again, comes from the Department of Revenue and their technical resources. But the key point is when you hear level funding, many folks are going to think that that's a zero, but the reality is, as you can see what I've highlighted, is that a level funding budget actually, because of the pressures of the fixed cost, will end up having a greater negative effect on the operating budget. In other words, I want to remind everybody that it's not just going to be that the operating budgets will be at zero. In many instances, you'll see that they'll be reduced beyond zero, and that's to offset the fixed costs that cannot come in as level funded. So going back here to the one-pager, right now, the story is we're staring down another budget deficit, and presently we're staring at about $1 million deficit. And so quickly, again, just because it's a snapshot, but you'll see in the materials that Carol has provided, and these are the operating budget draft numbers for the operations of the town. And as you'll see in the right-hand column, in many cases, there are zeros and there are negative numbers. Obviously, the things that stick out there, you can see the vacation and sick leave buyback as a fixed cost. Medicare is certainly a fixed cost. And you'll see zeros and negatives throughout, but I want to draw your attention to two lines that you'll see on the second page of the operating budget. So the first one that catches your eye is the line right there, line number 95, and that is the wastewater operating budget. So as we know, and as we've known, we're approaching fiscal year 22, we're approaching the completion of the pump houses, and we're approaching the operations of wastewater. So this is not a surprise. We expected it to be coming. And I would argue that it is essentially a fixed cost that we need to account for. So you can see that that number there. I want to draw out the next two budgets because I don't want anyone to misunderstand what they're looking at. And I want to make it clear that what they're looking at is based on my direction. But as an example, in the cemetery department, you can see that the bottom line increases by 30.6%. That increase is due, as you can see, the 31.9% increase under cemetery administrator sales and salary and wages. And that's because I've worked with Robin, as promised after the fiscal year 21 budget process. And as the board may know better than I, that she's been endeavoring to have an add to staff. So that references a permanent part-time position in the cemetery department. Now that's in the budget because I made that pledge and I told Robin that I would bring it to this point. And I don't want anyone to take it out on Robin that I've put it there. My point is it's obvious to anyone that we're not going to be able to go forward on that. So that will be reduced to no longer account for that permanent part-time position. To juxtapose that, the Board of Health actually has within their line items a seasonal part-time inspector. And they're able to accomplish that, as you can see, by the reductions of roughly 23% in their expense category. And that allows them to absorb the hit of adding a seasonal part-time position. Now, the two budget busters, if you will, for an impolite phrase, are clearly the wastewater operating budget and the cemetery based on that part-time position that I kept in there presently. If we remove, or when I remove that position in cemetery, so you're going to see that reduction, but it's not going to make a dent. It's still necessary to remove that because of where everyone's at, but it's not going to make a dent in the overall numbers. You can see that all of the other departments really have made up for the wastewater operating budget, if you will. So lines 95 and 99 account for an increase year over year of $338,985. Yet because of the reductions presently in the operating budgets for just about everybody else, you can see that we still come in at just under a 1% increase in the departmental budget. I bring all this up because these numbers associated with this number here tells me that with a month to go to present to the board, working on an operating policy of the board of level funded, we're looking at a significant deficit, and we're looking at a significant deficit that, in all likelihood, even if we see some offset from health insurance, and even if I go back out and remove the add to staff for cemetery, we're still going to be in a deficit. And so I wanted the board to be aware of that as early as I had it, because as you go through the document, you'll see that the departments, by and large, are already at zeros, if not negatives. That means there's going to be significant pressure on me to balance this budget. And that means the next step would have to be reductions in force. I don't see at present, again, barring any significant changes in some of the other fixed costs, we're looking at, yet again, an operating budget with strain on it and with a deficit. Again, the title or the agenda item this evening was simply discussion, but I wanted to put that out there to give a month's notice, if you will, and update the board to let you know where we're at. And if the board has any guidance or directives tonight, it would be helpful, because my next steps will be to cut further to achieve the level funding budget. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, a lot to throw at you, but that's what I offer up tonight for your information and discussion.
Joe, I think what we'll need to do is digest this for a week or two before your month and bring that back as an agenda item.
Certainly.
Larry?
Because we have, obviously, we have some work ahead of us. Ed?
Yeah, it would be helpful to evaluate this if we could, well, for me anyway, if I could get a more detailed breakout of the revenue side of the ledger with, say, three past history of the last 3 budget years.
Larry, if he does that, I'd sure as heck like to know the trajectory of our revolving funds, which you know I've been on as a case for 3 years.
Okay.
Larry,
Michael, did you have your green light on?
Yes. Ed actually asked one of my questions. Thank you. And, you know, second, I think it's interesting that our revenue actually went up. Local receipts, sorry. Our local receipts, we had an increase in local receipts, if I'm reading it correctly, right, Joe?
Correct. We're presently forecasting for a modest increase in revenue. And I think part of that is for what we saw, which was totally unexpected during pandemic, but that we now understand that folks fled, if you will, from the urban environments, came to from the suburbs to places like Harwich and spent their money locally. So right now we're looking at a modest increase in revenue. That's correct.
Thank you. The other observation really is Cape Tech, which they've always come in with a really good budget with low increases, but it's still a 2% increase. So they came in right at our number. And I didn't see it in their presentation, and I apologize if it's in there, but I would really like to see what excess and deficiency, what their actual number on excess and deficiency is. And then looking at Monomoy, it's great that we all think that we're going to have this meeting and that Chatham's going to jump up and say, you know what, you're all right. Our school is, our elementary school population is declining. We're going to throw another 580,000 at this. I don't see it happening, which I think is going to significantly impact the numbers this year. And then I guess my last observation was, or for this moment anyway, 157% increase in the wastewater operating budget. When last week we were, am I correct in that, Joe?
That is correct, Michael, yes.
Okay, so last week we were presented with, without knowing that it was going to be a 157% increase, we were presented with taking $52,000 out of the current operating budget to fund CAD modeling for future wastewater projects. And I think I did agree with Don that it is I think it's essential going forward, but I also think I recommended that, or I know I recommended that town meeting make this decision. You know, we found we commended tonight CPC for finding money in old appropriations. At the same time, the Board of Selectmen last week voted to take $102,000 out of a 2007 appropriation and $51,000 out of a operating budget that's now going to increase by 157% in this budget. And I, for one, don't know what we're doing if we're voting on things without knowing that this is going to go up by 157%. And I think that some member, anyway, a positive vote of last week's, really ought to take a look at this before we execute this contract, spend $52,000 out of a fund that's going to be 157% increase this year. But that's something that we certainly need, I think that we should revisit and talk about. And I do, again, will say that I value the CAD modeling. But looking at a $1 million deficit, it's irresponsible for us to be voting these numbers. But I'll look forward to seeing what we come up with. But as I think what Joe just said to us without saying it, we have some pretty significant cuts coming before us, unless we're going to go to town meeting and ask for a lot more money from people right now that are struggling, closing their businesses, and having a difficult time paying the taxes that we're already charging them.
Thank you, Michael. So I think with Joe's brief and with Carol's brief status report, we'll need to bring this back relatively quickly, Joe, and be through some of these subjects.
Understood, Mr. Chairman.
Don?
Yeah, I would be remiss if I let this opportunity go by, though. I really appreciate the depth of detail that we're getting, even on the preliminary numbers. I hate to say it this way, but I used to have to wear wading boots when I used to see the initial budgets from other town administrators. At least this is, yeah, I mean, Michael's able to draw conclusions. We all can draw conclusions, because at least there's some specificity that we can have some legitimate discussions about policy that infer those numbers or inform those numbers. So again, thanks to Carol, thanks to Joe. I mean, it's a much more detailed drilling down than we've seen in the past.
Let me ask you to send Joe and copy me, if you will, specific points you have regarding the budget that we need to discuss in more detail to help drive our next discussion, because we're not going to discuss every line item, but there's Michael's mentioned wastewater, which is basically a policy decision. We have others going forward. And then Joe, that will help direct our next agenda item if we do that.
Yes, thank you.
Larry, I have another question. I'm assuming that part of that is that expense is because sewers are going to be coming online, and there's going to be a cost associated with that in their water wastewater area. Does anybody have a handle, because that's not a uniform thing, that's a startup problem. There's eventually going to be attendant revenue that comes in. Anybody got an idea of when those lines converge, when the fees start reaching what the cost of running the system are?
I don't. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, I don't, but I know who to ask. But I also want to put out there, since the comment was brought up, we're still waiting to engage in conversations on some offsets to the operating costs by having a conversation with Chatham to see if we can rely upon potentially some shared resources or shared equipment. But it's a conversation that we're trying to schedule, and it needs to take place between the two towns.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, with that, thank you, Joe. John, did you have a comment from Finance Committee?
I do have a lot of comments, but I'll just add one. Is there a reason why we can't see the water budget too on this, Joe? You know, that's a pretty big number, and I'd like to see, you know, their number along with all the school departments and the operating budget and the debt services and all those other things. Because if you just look at this number, you see 71 million plus, but the water department adds about $5 million plus to that too. That's my only comment. And yeah, there's a lot of discussion to go forward on this, but great detail, great information. And we've all got our work cut out for us here, you know, unless we want to go to the town and ask for an override, which I don't think anyone wants to do.
If I could just respond to the,
you can answer that, sure.
Sure. With regard to the water, you know, the enterprise funds will be accounted for as well. And I know that Carol's microphone just went on, so I don't want to trip over anything she's going to say. But again, this is just, this is a 4-page document out of, I think Carol presented 400 pages with the last budget. So there's certainly plenty more information. As it says at the top of the page, this was meant to be a thumbnail update by me to give everybody just a look in time as to where we're at presently. And to that end, I do appreciate the comments there earlier. The effort here for Carol and I is to not surprise anybody about it at the last minute, but to provide these updates when the time comes. And leveraging the conversations with schools felt like the right time to do that. Having said that, Larry, I don't know if I dissuaded Carol from speaking, but if she has anything to add.
I'm going to invite her anyway to say a few words. Carol?
Hi, good evening. I can't turn my camera on for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, I just wanted to point out a couple of things to you. The number you have in there from Monomoy Regional School District includes a 10% increase on their health insurance. So that number came in late on Friday. And when I sent this to Danielle on Friday, I had the wrong presentation. So I apologize for that. You're going to see their number for Monomoy come down a little bit. So I wanted to point that out to you. The water budget is about $4.2 million on an annual basis. We'll get all that detail to you as well. I think we'll put it in the same format we have right here, if that works for you, John.
Yeah, I'd just like to see a total.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Carol.
Thanks,
Any other comments? If not, directionally, Joe will come back and...
Larry?
Yes, Michael?
I didn't mention it, but I do want to mention it. I want to personally thank all of the department heads for working on this. I think obviously based on Joe's numbers, based on departmental budgets, that they've all taken our budget message very seriously.
Yep.
And they've made cuts, and that they are being, you know, as responsible, I think, right now as they can. So clearly, based on what we're looking at, and thank you, Carol, for your last comment, we're looking at future cuts. But I do believe, based on the number in departmental budgets, that every one of them should be thanked for their efforts in trying to reduce the budget.
Thank you very much for that, Michael. Joe, we'll move then to the next item on the agenda, which is the, does someone else have a comment? Joe, then we'll move to the seasonal population estimate form.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a standard item that you've done before. I'm now noticing, however, that we did not have the previous number from last year. If the board is so willing, I would ask the board if there could be a motion to provide the same number that was provided last year, and we'll get that into the ABCC.
So I have a motion.
So moved.
Don, second it?
Yeah.
I'll take a roll call. Don?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you, Joe. And we'll let you fill that in and we'll move on.
Thank you.
Larry, if I may?
Please.
I move that we approve the 2021 common viculars license renewals 1 through 4 as listed in the packet. And then mention that pending proof of insurance by Lighthouse Cafe.
Second.
Is there any discussion? I'll go with the roll call vote then. Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Michael, I'll throw it back to you.
Yep, Larry, if I may, I would move that we approve the 2021 auto license renewals 1 through 3 as listed in the packet.
Second.
Who's, was that Ed you that seconded it?
Steve. Oh, it was me, Steve.
Well, Steve seconded it, Joe, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll go with Don?
Yeah, I just have a question. Peter Stagg's location, I mean, it looks like it's all, is that for this address that's here? Because it looks like it's all buttoned up and nothing's happening.
So my understanding on that is if they were to surrender their class 2 and 4 licenses, that could impact upon the use of the property. So they're availing themselves of their right to renew every year.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
I think in past discussions, he's also been concerned about possible sale in the value of that. Those permits. I'll take a roll call then. I'll start with an aye. Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And Michael, I'll throw it back to you then. We have one more.
I move that we approve section 1.07 of the Harwich Board of Selectmen liquor license regulation request for closure by licensed establishment, Ember Pizza Inc., DBA Ember 600 Route 28.
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? If not, I'll go with the roll call. Stephen?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Moving next to our contracts.
I move that we approve Cranberry Valley Golf Course Clubhouse Entrance Site Improvement Contract with Bowditch Excavating, Inc. for $86,300.
Second.
I just have to comment that we're getting this just under the wire to get it done before the season starts. And there's been, this is a great bid, and I know, Ed, you're a liaison to the committee, but they've been very anxious to move ahead on this.
Yep.
Larry,
we have a motion, second. Any discussion?
Larry?
Yes.
One comment before we vote. I just wanted to thank administration and the procurement team for adding the checklists to this packet.
I actually read the checklist. It is a nice summary to get us through the discussion. So that is great. I think a roll call vote. Steve?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So the next item, Michael, you're on a roll. You wish to, or Joe, you wish to.
I move that we approve the execution of a donation agreement with Route 137 LLC for the construction of a sewer stub as part of the Harwich Sewer Project, Phase 2, Contract 1 project for $11,051.59.
Is there a second?
Second.
That was you, Steve?
Yes, it is.
Joe, you have any other comment on this?
Yes, I want to emphasize that this is property related to Chris Wise. It is not in any way, shape, or form related to a 40B. This relates to the project that he has for the 10 lots that was approved, I believe, back in 2019.
Okay. Any other discussion?
The only Larry, if I may.
Sandy, you have a comment?
Yeah, it's my understanding, thank you, Chairman, that once it is sewered, then a 40B would be an option for Chris Wise. I know that's not on the discussion, but without that sewer, he never
Yeah,
gets 40B.
Mr. Chairman, I know I don't have standing to ask for a point of order, but that is not what this gets to. And I wanted to make my statement earlier to ensure that this is not related to a 40B. This is a perfunctory agreement between the property owner and the town to reimburse for the cost. The sewer stub cannot be denied at the property. The town is being made whole absent our legal costs. So I don't want the board and by extension the town to think anything other than what that is. This is a donation where we're being reimbursed for the cost of the sewer stub, whether it's the 10 lot or the 40B.
Can I make a comment, Larry? Sandy,
Don?
Under a 40B, if there had been one, and there isn't one right now, but under a 40B, the lack of the sewer stub would not be a grounds to turn that down by state law. I mean, there are other things that we could consider locally. That's not one of them. So even if they don't get this now, you're mistaken if you think that that does anything in the overall picture of things.
Okay, Sandy, quick comment?
Just a clarification. So I understand that this is more procedural. I'm not saying there's a discussion around the stub. But from talking to Charlene, it was my understanding that this is a recharge zone, and because of the environmental impacts, a 40B wouldn't be able to override those impacts. They could override a zoning bylaw, but once so it's my understanding that the game does change. It's more of just like a public service announcement that, you know, the sewer is helping potentially Chris Wise's project go forward.
Sandy, let's move on because that's a separate discussion. We have a motion in a second. If there's other discussion, I'll take a roll call.
Larry?
Michael?
Larry, I just, discussion was thanking the town administrator for his explanation. And Sandy, I just want to tell you, I did look into this as well legally, and this is making the town whole for the subdivision only that he's been approved of. The other fight, if there is a project that goes forward, will be another fight. But right now, Joe is correct. There is no other project, but planning has approved this subdivision, and this is for the subdivision, and this is to make the town whole. So Chris Wise is paying his obligation to the town for the subdivision, not the 40B project that really doesn't exist right now.
Right, yeah, no, I understand the 40B is not on the table. I was just, and I know that the stuff has to happen. You know, it's procedural. It's not something that could be stopped. Thank you.
Okay. We take a roll call then. Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm Don?
Thank you. Aye.
I try to switch around. It's a mistake. I should always do the same order. And I'm an aye. So I passed. Joe, we move next to the town administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Very quickly, just a reminder to the board, there is a public meeting of the board tomorrow evening, Tuesday, January 12th. However, as you know, the board will only be in open session for the purposes of going into executive session, and the board would be coming out of executive session merely to adjourn. So there is a meeting tomorrow night in executive session. Separately, as the board had asked before, there was an application relative to La Alouette. There was a board meeting scheduled for Friday. The application hasn't been received yet, so the Friday meeting of the board will not occur. But as soon as we have that application and we'll get that hearing back on track, we'll let you know.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Selectmen's reports. Don, I'll start with you since I...
Well, good, because I don't have anything.
Okay. Steve?
I don't have anything either.
Michael?
Nothing.
Ed?
Well, I have a couple things. First off, refresh me what the timing on the meeting tomorrow night is.
This is 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention to folks, a number of folks involved on Main Street in Harwich will be doing a site walk on Wednesday afternoon at 1 o'clock to go over the draft of the sort of more or less look at the draft in real time for the shared streets application that we're moving towards submitting, and that'll be done in advance of having a presentation done on it at our next meeting.
When is that, Ed?
Wednesday at 1 o'clock.
Fully. I would have liked to have done that, but I mean, we probably should have posted this on the off chance that more than 2 selectmen would go.
Well, we wanted to get some of the stakeholder presentation for some of the stakeholders along the avenue and other, whoever else wanders in. And it just seemed to be the easiest way of doing it. Rather than trying to have these awkward individual meetings with people.
Don, if I can get agreement from the other selectmen that only you will join Ed, will be okay.
Or you.
I will not be there.
I can't make it. And Steve?
It's fine. If Don wants to go, that's fine.
Yeah, I just want to get an idea of what it looks like on the ground. I think it's an excellent thought, Ed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. And I have nothing, so I entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. Roll call, Don?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So we didn't go quite as long as last